All right, we are good. All right, so
Okay.
I have a special guest today, Jim White. Before we go into the interview, I just want to give you everybody a backstory. I was working on this documentary, right, and it was just about a flood on March 27th, and apparently these happen quite often. And I started digging into it, and I found some compelling content and some compelling studies online. And when I started researching more and more for the documentary, I came across all these different studies, these feasibility studies, these contaminants in the water, and the documentary went a different direction because at first it was just about, hey, this flood's gonna happen again, we're gonna get more rain. But then I started seeing more stuff, and I wondered why nobody was talking about this. And I found out nobody was talking about it. And the people that are like the civil engineers and the commissioners, they're talking about the floods that are happening, but nobody talked about the Arroyo. So, Jim, you're a former environmental consultant, right? So,
That's correct.
introduce yourself and tell everybody, lay the groundwork for what we're about to talk about.
My name is Jim White. I'm from the Valley. I'm generations from the Valley, as my wife's family is as well, from Hidalgo County. I was educated at University of Texas at the time, Pan American, in geology and biology both. I worked at the time it was the Texas Natural Resource Conservation Commission. Today it's the Texas Commission of Environmental Quality. And so I worked for them for a number of years through the part of the 90s and into the early 2000s as a master's deputy. And then I worked in the water treatment in water quality as well for the agency. And I left the agency in the early 2000s for personal reasons. From there, I went and worked again at the university at the Coastal Studies Laboratory out on South Padre Island, where I remained for some time. Worked for Cameron County for a while uh, before finally, through the time that I was with the Coastal Studies Lab, I was also doing consulting work. And so I built that into a business doing Section 404 permitting, rare and endangered species surveys, submerged aquatic vegetation, and things like that, to allow people to do development in the area. So, in a way, I guess I was one of the bad guys for a while. But the the entire Rio Grande Delta or Valley has been an area of great interest to me for a long time because I have a lot of family and I have family there still. So that's pretty much me.
Okay. And your role during these times, these jobs, what was your role?
Uh, During well, as I mentioned, when I was with the state agency, I was with the water master, and then I was with water quality division from there. And with the coastal studies laboratory, I was a research assistant under Don Honkaday and under Dr. Miguel Nevares as well, from the former president of UT Penn Am. And then with EDM Environmental Consulting, I was my own boss. You
Okay.
know, I was everything, scientist, report writer, everything.
So let's go to the Arroyo Colorado for first because
Sure.
what I found was quite compelling. So can you kind of give us a history of the Arroyo and what it's about and what it has inside it?
Yeah, well, the Arroyo Colorado, what you see today, especially from Rio Hondo downstream to where it empties out into the Laguna Madre, is not a natural feature. From there down below, that was dredged. I, you know, I'm kind of on the spot for dates, but I think it was sometime in the early mid part of the 20th century, maybe in the 40s, maybe as far back as the 30s. At one time, I remember I had a pretty good handle on that, as I recall, it's back then. But so the actual original Arroyo kind of parallels. It it really begins about where the floodway begins in Mission, and it was a natural drainage, and evidence of that natural drainage are still visible between the mouth of the Arroyo Colorado, what is today the mouth of the Arroyo Colorado, and Port Mansfield. And there's the outlet right there. It's difficult to get to. It's difficult to get into and out of. About the only way is either with an airboat or a really shallow rafting boat. But that it's still pristine land for the most part. It has little lomas on it that support all kinds of rare and endangered species of animals. At one time, it was a shooting range for during World War II for the as they trained out at Kingsville, and so there's all kinds of old antique brass from their 50 calibers and stuff that they're from the for aircraft. But the new Arroyo, when it was built specifically for shipping, and so they would, and today it's still used for that. As a result, you have a lot of agriculture in the area. All you got to do is drive up to Rio Hondo and those areas, and you can see all the cotton fields, all the everything's still in there. I'm sure they may even grow cane in some of those areas. So they take water and they use it to begin with. The water of the Arroyo Colorado isn't really. It's at the time when I was with the agency, it was considered to be one of the, and I want to say there were 7 critically endangered watersheds or streams in Texas, and Arroyo Colorado was one of them. Today, there's probably still advisories about eating fish out of it. I know everybody does, but so back to what's happened there is that you have all this agriculture in the area, and since that was put in place, you in the Arroyo, if anybody's ever been in it and water skied or whatever, an old friends of mine used to do that. There's not much current in there, and so anything that goes in there is kind of suspends, and you got a lot of muds. Muds are atomically designed so that they attract other molecules. So you can see that if you have a wash, you have a big flood or a big rain like we had, like you were describing earlier, a lot of that runoff is going to go into the Arroyo, significant amounts of that runoff. It's carrying those chemicals from the fields. So back early on, back when I was a kid, that's a lot of years ago, we used DDT. And DDT is a persistent chemical. It's a persistent chemical, one that lasts in the system for literally it's almost like a nuclear molecule because it has half-lives and it breaks into different things. And so we would, at one time when I was an undergrad also, we sampled the Arroyo a number of times for, it just did fractionals on different metals and stuff that were in there. But we would also, and other people that were doing sampling at the time noticed that these environmental chemicals had a lot of breakdown. The breakdown products still in them, DDE, dieldrin, stuff like that. And so all those are attached to the mud. So you kind of get my drift as you get a big wash down through there, and it's going to increase. You're going to have some current pushing everything out. That's going to go right into the Laguna Madre as well. And so I don't know today if anybody's ever really done any studies on contaminants in around the mouth of the Arroyo or those areas that we like to fish so much. But I would be surprised if they didn't pick up some.
Why isn't
elevated counts?
Why isn't anybody talking about this? Or am I oblivious? Like I'm just not.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I'm probably. I'm an old man. I am retired, which I love being, and so I don't have a whole lot to lose. I worked for the state agency, so obviously I can't probably name any names or anything like that, but I can name times and incidents and things like that. Certainly, you can go back and find out who was in charge at that time. It goes Joshua, it goes all the way up the line. I know because I kind of got sideways with TCEQ when the new director came in. He extended an olive branch to me, and I found that because what I saw was out. It was out of line. It wasn't ethical. A lot of the stuff wasn't ethical that I saw. So and especially, I mean, the valley, especially, you've got, Pulutiqueando everywhere. So a lot of these things get covered up.
Yeah, it's
They just
interesting
do.
because I don't see how like elected officials from here that have family here, that have children here, that have grandchildren here, they're growing up in this filth. They're growing
Yeah.
up in this chemicals that literally are proven to give everybody cancer, to give people cancer, to give people leukemia. I think we have a 30% higher risk of leukemia here in the Rio Grande Valley.
You know,
That's alarming. Like, and it's just not cancer, it's respiratory disease, respiratory illnesses, it's heart disease,
I
diabetes.
mean, we've had anencephaly when I was in college way back when was a big, where they were trying to figure out what was causing that. And it's obvious this is the pollutants in the system.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a pocket of you pretty much it's going to be environmentally related, at least in my experience.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, and I don't think people really understand that the arroyo is now, it used to be perennial, but now it's just wastewater that's making it pushed out.
Given it a current of any kind, that's it. So that's what I was saying. That for the most part, it's basically a stagnant, just little arm of the bay, because you can do a salinity study, and that's another problem is that salt also has affinities for chemicals and stuff, and so you've got a salt water line that comes way up the arroyo. I mean, so it's basically, just brackish water that doesn't move very well. It's a perfect breeding ground also for things of a biologic nature. You've got a lot of phosphates, and you've got a lot of farm chemicals in there that encourage the growth of other organisms that might be aquatic,
Hmm.
right? I mean, they encourage the growth of plants because they're nitrates, and so once you put them in the system, you have everything from algae blooms to little parasites like Naegleria, probably.
And algae and those bacterial things, they're the ones that push up the air quality, right? Is that correct?
Some algae are really some. I mean, algae, that's a big field, and there's a lot of algae that are really beneficial. Some of them are, green algae that actually give back oxygen and stuff. There's just a lot of different algae, but it's a very low organism on the food chain, and so other things that may not, other little, like I said, parasites and things like that that you might not want will feed on those microalgae and stuff like that. So it gives
Yeah.
them a better environment to grow, right? So you just, like you said, you got a toxic soup. It's basically a toxic soup, because you got living organisms, and you've got dead stuff. I mean, you've got chemical byproducts in there. So
Yeah. And I don't think
bad.
people really understand either that is when it floods, it mixes up with the sewage, right? So it comes
Mm-hmm.
up and then all that filth is mixed in and people are playing in it and they're getting it in
Mm-hmm.
their mouths. It's nasty stuff. And I don't think
Yeah,
people really understand.
they don't, and people don't understand um, the the uh, the actual area that they live in, how flat it is. It's so incredibly flat. It's like I was saying before we went on. It's so incredibly flat that it doesn't drain. And so anytime you get these torrential rains like that, it's going to fill up the arroyo. It's going to fill up the part of the floodway, maybe. It's going to fill up some of those other irrigation canals and stuff like that. But it's not going anywhere because there's no incline, there's no slope for it to be able to drain. So it just sits there on the surface, another toxic pond, so to speak.
What's
And we've
interesting.
seen it time and time again in the valley. For example, I mean, I'm old enough to remember Hurricane Beulah. We had standing water into the late '90s from that,
Wow.
pothole lakes and stuff like that.
So Beulah was 1967, correct?
Correct.
You're talking about years and
Shit,
years.
decades,
Wow.
decades ago. And yet it filled up every resaca, every little pothole lake, everything, and persisted until the time, like I said, into the early '90s probably.
Wow. So you
because that's how flat this area is.
so you're talking about these like pesticides and chemicals and these banned chemicals that were used in farmland, and you're saying that these don't go away. They stay in the ground.
Yeah, they have half-lives exactly like radioactive. They're in no way related, but we look at them in the same way. How long does it take it to degrade in half? And what does it become when it degrades in half? And so it takes a long time, and they break down into equally toxic molecules as they're breaking down,
Wow.
which is, yeah,
So
it's just a consequence of who we are, who we were, who we are, and where we're going. There are consequences of that. And then you got to cipher in, a lot of some of these chemicals that we banned are still being used in Mexico. And
wow,
so when it drains off into the Rio Bravo on their side, the Rio Grande on our side, who
wow.
gets the majority? We all get it.
Yeah,
We
that's
get it.
interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Let me name you some of these contaminants that are in the arroyo. So there's arsenic, there's
Good
chromium, selenium, zinc,
metals. Hmm.
PCBs, DDT, DDE, chlordane, and toxaphene,
Hmm. Hmm.
pesticides, Vibrio vulnificus, which is a bacteria, which is
Correct.
I'm sorry,
The
the
flesh eating.
bacteria.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And I talked to a reporter the other day, said that every year there starts to go up a little bit more, the flesh-eating bacteria cases, which is interesting too. And then there's also low dissolved oxygen and nutrient overload. Uh,
Right. Which I didn't touch on. That's a very good yeah, that's a good point.
can
So
you touch,
a
can you
low
touch on
DL.
that?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Can you touch on that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, dissolved oxygen. We all got to breathe, and so the water has oxygen in it as well. It has dissolved oxygen molecules in the fish and any aquatic creature that breathes water filters those oxygen molecules out. So when you get uh, a nutrient overload, as you said, and as I was talking about, those nutrients are in general like nitrates that are coming off the fields. They will uh, compete. You get some certain bacteria and things that they'll compete for oxygen, or they'll by their nature limit oxygen in the water as well as you heat the water is. And so everybody knows the valley is really hot, so when the water is heated during the summertime, I mean, that arroyo can be 90 degrees Fahrenheit. It doesn't hold as much oxygen as if it were 50 degrees Fahrenheit.
Hmm.
That's the physical property of water right there. So it's a huge thing. So you can get fish, and we do, and get fish kills, and in certain areas they're just like dead zones where there is no life because there's no oxygen in the water.
Well, let's talk about I read a study about the Donna Lake, and somebody was talking to me about it. They sent me a message also in the Mercedes area too, where they remember back like in 2012, 2013, they went fishing and they said they saw abnormalities on the fish.
Yeah,
And I also read a study that the shrimp and the fish had like 1,500% more contaminants in them than anywhere else. Can you
correct.
kind of
Yeah,
touch on that as well?
yeah, I can, and I'm surprised that nobody's ever talked about it more, because it was a project that we worked on when I was with the TNRCC. Donna Lake, way back when, had a bunch of transformers that were buried near there, right near. I in the area where if they're not in the water, I think some of them may be in the water there, but most of them were buried around it. And so those transformers contain PCBs.
What year was,
Really,
sorry.
the year that I was, like I said, I was with the agency from the mid '90s through the early 2000s.
Okay.
So it was during that time period that and there's even somewhere in earlier when I was texting with you, obviously, I was really surprised because a lot of this information, even AI won't find it. I don't know what's become of it. I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but sometimes things make me scratch my head and go, huh, how is this happening? So in any event, there was a report, and TC or TNRCC at the time has that report, or had that report about, we mapped the area. Charlie, I'm not gonna, I better not give names, but we mapped where a lot of these were, and today, and I'm surprised that, and it would be my warning from here that people should not eat any fish from Donna Lake. Or there's an advisory from the, I know there's an advisory from the TCEQ, and I'll see if I can find it, send it to you. Because I think EPA has an advisory as well, not to consume anything from there, because uh, the levels of PCB were so high.
Wow.
So it just surprises the crap out of me that people are. I mean, I know the valley. I'm Little Valley. Like I said, generations. But we gotta do better than this, because we'll kill ourselves.
You know what's interesting about that too is I put some information out right now. I'm getting a lot of traction about it because people are really interested in what's going on. But then
I
you
hope
always
so.
get yeah, you always get some of these people, well, I fish at Arroyo and I'm fine. And that goes back right to my grandpa too. He's 95 years old. He fishes in the Arroyo. He's
Yeah.
healthy. He's fine. Does it affect some people? What is it? How do I come back to those people? Like how do I make sense?
Well, at 95, I mean, I would. Yeah, when my dad was 95, it was like, eat all the candy you want. You made it, man. You made it.
Yeah.
But younger people, you're playing Russian roulette. I mean, look, we all know this story of the Wella that, she smoked all her life and drank, 2 6 packs a week. And, she was 103 when they interviewed her, but she's the exception to the rule, right? There's rules. And these people, the people, you're just playing Russian roulette. That's all you're doing. Because these chemicals don't, and the levels that these chemicals are at, they don't exit your body. They're in your body. And if your body chooses to handle them or wall them off or whatever, that's fine. But they enter your bloodstream. Like you said, we have abnormally high amounts of things like leukemia,
Yeah.
because those things are in your bloodstream. So that's, I mean, I don't know. It's education.
Yeah, you answered this question before, but let me ask you again. So on the health and the long-term impact, do you believe that there's a link between the contaminated flood waters that come out into the valley and the rising rates of cancer and development disorders in the valley?
That's my personal opinion, but I mean, it's just, to me, too self-evident not to, at least, I mean, I'm a scientist, and so I have to know definitively. But my personal belief is, yeah, I mean, we've come from 100 and some odd years of agriculture, and then we have manufacturing. Hell, right across the border from Brownsville, they make hydrofluoric acid. If you know what that stuff is, that's the most corrosive acid known. They import the chemicals from the Big Bend there, way over there, the fluoride, and they refine it in Matamoros.
Wow.
I've been to the plant, so
Jeez.
yeah. So if you ever had a spill in the byproducts of that, or then where they're going. They're going directly into the system. If they don't go into the river, they're on the land. So
So let's
yeah, it's bad.
you sent me a study about a spill. Can you kind of touch on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting subject, and I think I'm probably past the statute of limitations, so I can talk about it probably without any name dropping. But back in the year 2000, in January, there was a Mexican tanker truck that was full of furfural, which is a chemical. It's an aldehyde, like formaldehyde and some of those other chemicals, but it's used widely in agriculture, of all things. And so it was off. It was a tanker truck. It was off balance. It could have happened to somebody from either side. But what I'm saying is that it was either carrying the furfural to Mexico or coming from Mexico. The plates were Mexican on the truck because I was at the scene. And so the truck flipped over and dumped out part of its load into a storm drain there off of 48, I believe it was. About 7,000 gallons of it went into this. 7,000 some odd gallons went into the system. And so the first thing that the agencies do in emergency response to a spill like that, especially somewhere like in the Rio Grande Valley, where you have various interconnecting water systems that go out into the Laguna Madre, is that you come as close as you can to where that spill is happening. You monitor, come as close as you can to where it's happening, and create a containment dike right there so that it contains the water, contains the chemical, and then you figure out how you're going to clean it up. 7,000 gallons is a lot of chemical.
Yeah.
So over with research done, it the chemical actually degrades in sunlight and pretty much becomes a harmless couple of molecules. So I think that's the direction that they were heading in at the time. We were monitoring the lake for amounts, or not the lake, but we were monitoring this impoundment for amounts of furfural that were, for chemical amounts that were in it. That little drainage that was in went directly into San Martin Lake, if you know where San Martin Lake is. So we took the amount we took the EPA standard and went to the regional director with it, and he chose another standard and had them take the containment dike down and the levels were still pretty high. And so all this furfural went into San Martin Lake, and it did a lot of damage in San Martin Lake at the time. I think it's recovered for the most part, but it killed a lot of critters. And then from San Martin, you know where that goes? That goes into the Brownsville ship channel. So the furfural spill went into the Brownsville ship channel, where it was for the longest time, and it kind of stays together. So we would monitor the spill itself, but sometimes, depending on how warm or cold the water was, it would sink up and down the water level. So as far as I know, there's probably still some there coming up and down, but for very little, because like I said, it degrades in sunlight. But it did a lot of damage, and it did a lot of damage because people did not have. They had some of the bureaucrats thought they knew what they didn't know. And so, and then there was a big cover up afterwards. And so we got letters. I saw a letter that came in, and I probably wasn't supposed to see it, from somebody like over by George West or something that was asking questions about it. And it was like, holy crap, how do these people know about this? About the damage it did, because they really kind of tried to put a cap on it. It's like, no, we don't want anybody to know that 7,000 gallons got into the Brownsville ship channel. And that's when I sent you that link, there's nothing online about it. The only thing that's online is that NOAA report when it first happened. I can't find, even AI won't find anything about it.
Wow.
It's the damnedest thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's heartbreaking. Yeah.
But at least there's the initial reports there, so you can take a look at that.
Let's go back to the Arroyo and also the SpaceX, because now we have SpaceX here in Cameron County, and I think SpaceX was allowed now to be able to put 200,000 pounds of wastewater into just to get rid of it, right? So that's one thing going into the island or the area, and then you got the Arroyo, which is filtering out into the Laguna Madre. I did a study because I'm huge into AI, so I'm researching everything and I'm trying to figure out like
it's a good tool.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Good tool.
The long-term implications for South Padre Island, and it kind of said that in about 20 years, the South Padre Island that we know now isn't going to look the same. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, I mean, just geographically and oceanographically, the whole deal. South Padre Island is there's a series of South Padre Islands that are now up against the shoreline, like where Laguna Vista and all those places are.
Yeah.
because barrier islands naturally tend to migrate towards the shoreline because you have a south-southeast wind always blowing on it. So what's happening now? I mean, you just got so many situations. You've got jetties that are inhibiting the transport of sand across to the north side, at the Brazos Santiago, and you've got dredging, and you've got all kinds of stuff going on. So, given that you have almost a 365 wind, southeast wind going on, it'll change the shape of the island to begin with. So a lot of that will be just natural process, and is natural process. Um, Man-made, you know, all you got to do is look.
Yeah. So
It's there.
let's look out to the future in 20 years. What does the island look like, in your opinion?
I think, this was the eternal optimist in me, that I think that because nature is such a powerful force, at some point, maybe not in 20 years, maybe somewhere on the road, um, there'll definitely be a storm that'll come through there that'll wreak havoc
Wow.
and clean out a lot of that. It just does. They do it every so often. Um, how they choose to rebuild is up to them. I worked on the island itself doing a lot of ecological surveys and studies, and I think for the most part, there's a lot of genuine people that care about that island that live there. I think everybody that lives there basically does, and so they given that mindset, I think that it'll be okay.
Yeah.
At least people wise.
Yeah, at least people wise.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing that I came on about Beulah is you said you lived through that, correct?
Hmm.
So when I was researching that, 1967 Beulah, 150 tornadoes came in through the valley that with Beulah, and the newest storm that we had, March 27th, I saw the one of the NOAA websites that it clocked south of Harlingen, it clocked the water at 54 feet high. 54 feet, that's 5.5 stories.
Yeah.
That's scary. So if we get another Hurricane Beulah with tornadoes, with hail, with rain, with the 5.5 stories of water coming.
Yeah. It'll rearrange the entire valley. The valley, if you could see it through my eyes, when I was a kid, it was dominantly an agricultural area. Now it's dominantly an urban area. And so, what would have made lakes out of those fields, and what did make lakes out of those fields, will now make lakes out of neighborhoods.
uh,
And so, it's frightening. It's the tragedy that could and will result from that, because nature. One thing you can guess about nature is that it's going to do it again and again, and it'll do it the same way every time.
so how do we prepare for something like that? Like, can we prepare for like
I,
something?
man, Joshua, at this point, I don't know. I think that everybody, they need to address it. Maybe, I mean, they've got evacuation routes and all those kind of things. The chaos that something like Beulah would cause now in the valley, unprecedented. I
Yeah, I
mean,
also went back to AI, and it said that if we do have another Hurricane Beulah type of events, that 1 in 14 people in the valley, if they don't evacuate on time, can perish. So
that's
that
correct. Yeah, yeah, mass casualties for sure, and likely there will be, because the valley people, they can't. A lot of them can't. A lot of them won't.
yeah.
And so, yeah, it's heartbreaking.
There was another study
It's
that,
education, my man.
yeah, it's interesting.
It's all about education.
Even when you tell people, they won't believe it. It's the most mind-boggling thing to me is like when you present them with facts and studies is like, no, no, no pasa nada, or whatever. I can
Yeah,
get through it
yeah,
and whatever.
yep, yep,
I'll
yep, yep.
survive it.
Yes, sir.
Another interesting thing too is that the valley that has high exposure to flooding, like the lower Rio Grande Valley, has 82,000 homes that are located in the 1% of annual chance floodplains. Like that,
Yeah,
that's a ton of homes.
it's a lot of homes. I mean, there's just no choice. If you choose to live here, then you just got to know that you live on a delta. You don't live in the valley. You know, the valley. I mean, that's a term the developers used in the early 20th century to sell land to people from the Los Gringos days. They like up in the central part of like Missouri and places like that. The Magic Valley of the Rio Grande. No, there's no way it's a valley. I mean, the closest mountains are like 100 miles to the Cerro Picachos in Mexico. So it's
Jeez.
no valley. It's a river delta from the Rio Grande River, that's a whole thing in itself.
Yeah. So it is just a matter of time until we get something like Beulah coming again.
It's a matter of time. It's a matter of time. We're up here in Rockport, and we got hit by her. We weren't here because we're nomadic, but we were hit by a Hurricane Harvey in 2017, I think. Yeah, 2017. It was a Cat 5, and it's a good thing not too many people live in this area because it was bombed. You know, it was just bombed. It was bad.
So before
We
we
lost
finish
some.
up the podcast, maybe we can share some more insight. Something I hate saying like a warning to the valley, right? Because it sounds like you're
Yeah, no,
putting them.
I'm not. Yeah. Just advice. I mean, I think that every single one of us that live in the valley or from the valley, although I don't really live there anymore. I have kids that live there, and the valley. I'm part of it, and so I think every one of us should be a voice of reason for these things. And so the more that you know, the more authentic your voice of reason can be. And the first thing that you should learn is about the area that you live in and physically what it's all about. And so once you know that, and once in the history, you know the Dene people say that a culture without a history is not a culture. So you have to know your history. And so that's another thing that if we know our history, we know where we live, and we can look into the future, I think, and do some planning. But it's all about, just keeping your eyes open, and life's more than just Snapchat.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay, one more question. What can the valley do, right? The Rio Grande Valley, what can they do to help mitigate this? Because obviously the Arroyo goes from Mission all the way to Laguna Vista, right? Laguna Madre, I'm sorry. What can we do? Like, is there anything that we can do?
as far as to mitigate what's going on with that stuff, I mean, you just in your own personal lives, be careful with what you put on I mean, it comes right down to watering your lawn and what you use to, feed and any kind of pesticides you use and things like that. It's just personal responsibility and stuff, right? And
Yeah,
so if you're part of the solution by being aware what you're doing personally, then you're not in that liability column.
I got you.
So you're in the asset column.
And what about like government agencies or cities or municipalities? Is there anything that they can do?
Yeah, there's a lot that they can do. Is there anything that they will do? That's a question for another day.
If you were to
That's
put a cost on the amount it would take to be able to make the contamination of the arroyo like no longer contaminated, what cost would you say? Was it billions, millions, hundreds of millions? Is there a price?
yeah, I think it's incalculable, Joshua, because of again, it's knowing the geography and geology of the area, the layout of it. It's you can't a lot of it can't. It's not. It wouldn't be feasible. There's nobody's. You couldn't allocate that much money to clean things up like that. It just because you still have residual. Yeah, I think it's a Don Quixote thing.
That's
Yeah,
good.
we are what we are now, and we have to figure out how we deal with it. So we have to over time, their solutions will present themselves. So, like
Jim.
you said, and AI, I think, is going to be a big help with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jim, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your expertise. Anything else that you would like to say before we finish off the podcast?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the same thing, and I'm thank you for letting me get a couple things out there that I've thought about for years.
Awesome. Jim, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you too, Joshua. Take care, man.
Talk
Bye bye.
soon.